Okay, great. So as Chris Moyer just mentioned, we'll be talking about grid modernization, but I think we're going to talk about how some of the trends that we've been hearing about, renewables and DERs, are really going to affect the electrical grid. So with me to talk about this, I have Cris Eugster, Chief Operating Officer of CPS Energy, Kimberly Britton, CEO of EPICenter, and Carla Frieh, Director of Engineering at ComEd. Just a brief introduction, but I will go ahead and let them give a quick 30-minute intro on themselves and kind of your role and what you expect to bring to the panel. Chris?
30 minutes?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Erin and Zpryme, for partnering and bringing this here to San Antonio. I think it's just amazing to have this kind of dialogue in San Antonio. And I don't think there are a lot of cities that have a city of the future with all the different stakeholders here together to talk about how do we get to where we all want to go to. So again, thank you, Zpryme. Now, Trustee Janie Gonzalez, I got to call her out. She said, well, after that last panel, and Christine from Itron said she's the Lorax of the industry. She said, Chris, what are you going to do in your opening statements? I said, geez. So a lot of characters came to mind, but I don't think I could outdo the Lorax. So just count me in as a Lorax here in this industry. So I don't know if that goes far enough, Janie, but I gave it my best. A for effort. So again, y'all all know about CPS Energy, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I do think we've got a lot of exciting things going on. I really liked what Paula said. We really want to bring new innovative technologies here to San Antonio and almost be the test bed. You know, Silicon Valley may be where all the stuff is being invented, but we really want to apply it here in a way that makes sort of a meaningful difference. Partnering with EPICenter and Kimberly, it's going to take all of us to get to where we want to get to, and I'll just close at that.
Thank you, Chris. Kimberly?
Well, hi, and yes, thank you to Zpryme, Erin, and the folks, and Jason, wherever he is. We appreciate our partnership with Zpryme as well as CPS Energy. And I do have to give a shout out to both CPS and Itron. Both are founders of EPICenter. I have the privilege of being a CEO. We began that role as employee number 1 4 years ago. And we're created as a nonprofit to be an energy innovation and thought leadership organization based here in San Antonio, but working with folks all over the U.S. to bring emerging tech, emerging business models into the utility and other energy spaces, and to begin to be effective in terms of the implementation of those technologies. And for us, that manifests with an incubator and accelerator focused on energy, and also some services to utilities and others as they explore these and implement them. We help be boots on the ground in that effort as well. And then we too hold thought leadership events. And so it's really a neat opportunity to be based here in such a city that is so forward thinking and so robust in its efforts. And we thank you for the privilege of being here.
Thank you, Kimberly. And Carla?
Well, again, thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. It's been a lot of great conversation this morning. For those that don't know, I'm with ComEd, and ComEd is the electric utility for Northern Illinois, including the city of Chicago. So really excited to be here today and share with everyone some of the things that we're doing, looking at technologies on the grid, integrating renewables, as well as looking at ensuring that we really have the communications platform needed to integrate those new technologies as they're developed.
So we have 2 utility representatives on this panel. My first question is going to be to all of the panelists. Maybe, Carla, you can start. Cities, as we know, are setting, these decarbonization plans, these strategies. How does that affect utilities?
Yeah, so ComEd and your utilities are really facing a number of challenges, right? Looking at climate change, cyber and physical security, changes in what our customers are expecting of us with control, and then also decarbonization. And so it's really looking at recognizing that the technology we have today doesn't meet where we're going in the future. And so how do we get there and understand what new technologies are needed, or how do we set up the grid to be able to integrate those new technologies in the future? And so part of that, and we've heard it a lot this morning, I think, from all the panelists, is looking at partnerships. And so a big thing ComEd has been doing is looking at partnerships with the communities we're in, understanding the needs of our customers and our communities, but then also partnering with technology providers or leaders in technology. In universities, students in our areas were looking at it, and so looking at how we look at that technology, integrate it on the grid, test it to enable it to come on the grid.
Thank you, Carla. And Cris, maybe you could.
Yeah, the city of San Antonio, as you all know, passed a climate action and adaptation plan this past year with the goal of being carbon net zero by 2050. Our board of trustees also passed a resolution in support of that plan. So, we have a very lofty, ambitious goal to get to carbon neutrality by 2050, and there's going to be a lot of work to get there. I think what we put forth in front of this community is the flexible path, which is really a strategic framework for incorporating new technologies to basically embrace change and see some of the things that we need to have happen to get to that lofty goal. And the flex path is not just for the utility sector. If you think about, most of our power is used for homes and buildings and businesses, but we're seeing the transportation sector now electrify. So there's this whole process of electrification that's going on right now, and the utilities are at the center of all that and have the real opportunity to lead in that transformation. And our flexible path is really, in my view, a great mechanism, a great convening framework with all the stakeholders in San Antonio to basically get to the lofty goals that the city has put forth in a way that covers the 6 pillars of affordability, the environment, security, safety, resiliency, and being financially responsible as we get there as well.
And Kimberly, you don't work at a utility, but you work very closely with utilities. How are you seeing these decarbonization plans affect some of these other utilities that you're working with?
Well, absolutely. So I think that there is becoming more and more, there already is a sense of urgency, but there is an even greater sense of urgency and desire to look at the broader landscape. I think that I love the idea of what's been discussed already about how there's an incentive because of the customers, the people, and what they're expecting, what also the environment is facilitating. We've seen such a growth in technologies now, but yet they are not quite fully developed to support these very ambitious plans. So I think utilities, especially the forward-thinking ones like a CPS Energy, like ComEd, have really looked at the future and said, we know that we're not fully there yet, but we're going to move as quickly as we can, and it's those collaborations. We're an example of a collaboration where we're helping look at that landscape and move much quicker. Say something that might have taken 6 months, let's see if we can reduce that time of consideration and implementation downward. And so that's the role that it is taking all of us in supporting the utilities as they move forward in this space. But it's big ambition and a big I don't want to say burden. I think it just is a sense of obligation, of responsibility on their part that's causing them to really look outward more than ever.
And Kimberly, you've been working pretty closely with CPS Energy to kind of incorporate some of these new technologies. What are some of the challenges that you're focused on solving via, some of these new technology implementations?
So, you see a lot of the pain points in this area. It could be data analytics, the use of data. There's obviously a flood. And so we're looking at emerging technologies, whether it's from a startup or whether it's from a mature company, for instance, that has a tool for slicing and dicing and making usable data so that the utilities have some sight line for what they need to, the decisions they need to make. The other, frankly, is storage, because there is such a great need to be able to manage the energy demands both now and in the future. Storage obviously plays a huge role. So we're looking not only, where we're spending a lot of time is not only looking at lithium ion, which obviously has matured, probably has more acceptance in the market, but also looking at other types of storage. I would say even for EPICenter, that's a sweet spot because there are a lot of types of storage, but not all are utility scale. And so we're looking for things that are very environmentally friendly, but also can manage the demands that a utility needs.
Cris, can you talk about, Kimberly's talking about new technologies and innovation. Can you speak a little bit to how CPS is balancing innovation while maintaining reliability and affordability?
Yeah, and I do want to get back to the storage point because I think that's a very interesting space. But for us, reliability, customer affordability have to be part of innovation. We can't exclude those pieces of it. That has to be part of what we're trying to do. And again, under Paula's leadership, we put the 6 pillars out as ways that we get comfortable with a new technology and integrating it into our system. But energy storage, I think, is a very, very exciting space because that's the holy grail. If we can solve that, we can solve the intermittency of renewables. And we've got some very exciting things that are going on here in San Antonio. We're looking at hooking up large batteries onto our distribution grid close to our substations because there are a couple of hundred hours of the year that Texas really needs power. It's August afternoon. Everyone's, has their air conditioners on. Supply is limited. You see the $9,000 pricing. And if we had batteries to cover those couple hundred hours, it'd be huge. It'd be transformational. And so we're looking to partner with a company to basically put large-scale batteries on our distribution system, not transmission lines, but actually within the grid of our network here in San Antonio. Another technology that we're working with Kimberly's group is a very cool technology where they're liquefying air. And I was just like, when I first heard that, I was skeptical. How do you do it? But basically what they do is they just use cheap energy, wind power overnight, and basically, under immense pressures and low temperatures, create liquid nitrogen, liquid oxygen, and then they hold it in tanks, and so they can get beyond that 4-hour duration of lithium-ion battery limitations, and they basically can go to 6, 8, 12 hours, or even longer, based on the size of that tank capacity, and then reverse that process when you need that power back to the grid. So there's some pretty cool technologies out there, and one of the reasons that we have kind of evolved our power bundle to look at an all-source for the firming capacity is because of technologies that are out there that could solve that duration problem that we are seeing today.
Kimberly, I want to come back to you real quick before we go talk about ComEd. Do you have anything to add in terms of how utilities are trying to balance innovation with maintaining reliability and affordability?
Well, it's about bandwidth. And that's why you would even engage with someone like EPICenter in the first place, I think, is because, what we begin to find with our utility partners is that a great idea, whatever manifestation it might be, might come in the door 20 different ways. And it would move through the process, and innovation was happening, and implementation is happening. But to maybe have a partner who comes alongside and manages that process of exploration in alignment with the strategic direction of the leadership of the organization. And so I think that's what you're talking about, is it's not that utilities are not already looking at these perspectives, it's that just sometimes it bounces around. And as you heard earlier on the earlier panel, no one can wait. This has got to happen quickly. And so yet, while they're keeping the lights on and keeping their customers taken care of, sometimes to have that partner whose sole focus is on moving that process through the decision making. EPICenter doesn't make the decisions. We foster decision making. And that's been really exciting to be able to assist and see some things like this liquefied air coming to fruition. It's an exciting time, and we feel honored to be able to play a part.
Thank you both. Carla, can you talk about how ComEd is addressing some of these challenges, how they're balancing innovation with maintaining reliability and affordability? And then maybe more specifically, can you talk about how you're doing that and trying to achieve that last 20 and 30% of meeting those net zero requirements?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're looking at is partnering and completing what we're calling demonstration projects. So as we're looking at new technology, one of the big things that we've done is partnered with the city of Chicago, looking at the Bronzeville community. So Bronzeville is a community on the south side of Chicago. We've partnered with the city of Chicago as well as local really civic leaders, faith-based leaders in that organization to look at what can we do to look at Bronzeville and really test and create it as a community of the future and test some of this technology with these demonstration projects to look at what are the customers looking for. And so as part of that, to take a step back, we work with the community, with these civic leaders to understand what the customers are looking for, to identify projects that we think would be meaningful to them, to look at how we make the city more connected and green. And so one of the big flagship projects that we have there is the Bronzeville Community Microgrid, which is really going to be the first utility-owned clustered microgrid. And so it integrates with the Illinois Institute of Technology's microgrid, or IIT, and will be able to operate off the grid as needed with 7 megawatts of renewable generation, including solar, as well as battery energy storage. And as part of that project, we've actually installed 750 kilowatts of solar on a rooftop of what's called Dearborn Homes, which is basically a Chicago public housing facility. So we've partnered with Chicago Public Housing to install solar on there that will not only serve those homes, but it can feed back to the grid and then support the microgrid as well. So it's some of these demonstration projects that we're looking at. As well as, we're looking at projects around DER management. So as renewables are brought onto the grid, what type of systems are needed to be able to do real-time monitoring and operations of that grid? And then the other big thing that we're looking at, and I mentioned briefly, is, I believe a big piece of this is that although we don't know the next technology is coming, we know all these technologies need some sort of communication infrastructure. And so really looking at what is that optimum communications infrastructure that you're deploying to bring these new technologies on the system, whether it's that the devices are talking to each other in the field or sending data back. It's a mix, right? You've got devices that are going to talk to each other in the field. You've got that data that you want to come back into your control center so you can do real-time monitoring, and then come into your system to do data analytics and understand the ability. And so at least at ComEd, we're looking at a mix of fiber as well as wireless communication that is out on our network to really enable, creating that platform, that communications platform, so we can enable the new technology to come on the grid as it's being developed. And then lab space. So a big thing we've looked at is building labs to look at how are we working with our partners to test this technology and have real-time digital simulators to look at how we can simulate what it'll look like on the grid and do testing before we put it out to make sure that it is successful when we roll out these demonstration projects.
I certainly understand the importance of making sure you're testing the technology before you send it out to the rest of the service territory. But what I've found when researching utilities and grid modernization is there can be a lot of, like the death of projects after the demonstration phase. They can't get them out to the rest of the service territory. How can you take some of the lessons that you've learned from these demonstration projects and kind of, help them to influence your decisions and the way you service the rest of your territory?
Yeah. So I think a key of that is looking at the metrics, what you're tracking to look if it's a successful demonstration project. And that's not just what historically utilities have looked at, right? So historically we may look at reliability, some of our safe here, Katie metrics, but it's more than that. It's what is the societal impact, what is the environmental impact? And so you've really got to look at, when you set up these projects, what are the metrics you're tracking? And are they meaningful metrics? And so are they meaningful? Do they resonate with the communities that we're serving, that we're doing the projects in, so that we can really measure, bring back that data, measure those benefits to make that business case of here's why it makes sense to move forward. But I think the key piece is it's more than just what we've looked at historically with reliability.
Yeah, I agree. I also think we need to change our mindset. We need to change our mindset in terms of thinking about products and services that we can build off those pilots. We are a commodity kilowatt hour supplier, and we got to transform that to a product and services company where we bring these concepts to our customers in a much more engaging way than we have in the past. So, if we can make that transformation, we can decarbonize our grid, we can bring value to our customers, we can bring new products and services to our community. So to me, that's a big mind shift. We talk about that a lot, but actually setting up the capabilities, the competencies to bring products and services to your customers, to me, that's transformational, because utilities are stuck in, I've got to provide for all, I've got a cost recovery model, I'm under regulation. So how do we transform that paradigm to really bring products to our customers that they want and ultimately decarbonize the grid?
Cris, I'm going to come right back to you, and I think Carla was, kind of getting into this with data and analytics and kind of tracking and monitoring the success of these projects. How at CPS do you kind of make sure that the projects you have underway are going according to plan and are successful?
Well, all our projects are successful, right? Again, I think it's an interesting space to be in, because as you bring products out, you've got, sometimes Google brings out 1,000 products and they have 999 failures and they get one success and they create $1 billion market. For us, we are very risk averse. We want everything to be perfect, everything to be right, and it's part of our culture. If something happens, if the lights go out in the middle of the Super Bowl, it's a big deal. Management gets fired. It's like, so there's a risk aversion that I think we've got to overcome as we embrace this new world. But we are trying, and we've had a very successful STEP program, the STEP, now we're going to Flex STEP. It's been hugely successful, engaged with our customers. We have over 400,000 customers that have participated in STEP. We're going to bring in some EV products to the marketplace here. We've got thermostat programs. So we are starting to see some success there, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And I think, again, it's something that we have to change our mindset on.
Carla, can you speak a little bit more to how you see data and analytics playing a role in monitoring and, again, just kind of tracking these projects as they're underway?
Sure. So one of the things that we look at before we deploy anything is what is the benefit and how are we going to learn from this and what learnings can we take? And then as we're doing these demonstration projects, we're looking at collecting that data and how can you analyze that data to look at, capturing all the benefits and learnings. And then the other thing is key, I think, as you're integrating the renewables on the grid, is being able to do that real-time monitoring and operations of the grid and having that data. And so looking at, as those devices are talking to each other, real time in the field, what you can see back in your control center, but then what data are you pulling back to do analytics? And so what are you doing to do with machine learning? One of the things we're talking about is how can you use machine learning to really look at condition-based maintenance of any of the equipment that we're putting out. So tracking the assets, making sure that we know what we have out there where, and then doing condition-based maintenance versus time-based maintenance, which we've historically done. So if I have a lot of sensors out on my network, can I now pull back data from those sensors to predict that I'm going to have a transformer failure or a cable fault, and get out there and do maintenance whether I'm repairing or replacing that equipment prior to that failure?
Kimberly, what are you seeing utilities do in terms of using new technology to address and maybe even accelerate net zero goals?
Well, I think a couple of things are having to take place. Is that because even the most motivated utility system is bound, obviously, by their core business. And one of the things that I see a lot of challenge around, because everyone knows that, I shouldn't say everyone, there's an earnest move toward net zero goals, period. I mean, there's either external mandates or there are internal mandates. So you're going to be motivated one way or the other. The issue is culture and mindset. And so one of the things, we work a lot in terms of with our collaborative partners is how you rethink ROI. And obviously beginning with the customer in mind and the impact to the customer and what they're paying on their utility bill. But for them to rethink that as they explore something that might have a little bit of risk to it, to rethink about what they mean by ROI. It means that the folks in finance have to get their head around that, and start thinking about how can we do something then maybe we just don't think we can. You know, what's the legal environment? Because when I talk to folks who are bringing emerging technologies, I say you need to understand the constraints of your customer and help them figure out a path out of that. So I would say yes, I think that the technologies we're seeing, people are working on advancement of solar and storage. There's a great research project that we just will be publishing a white paper on that CPS is doing with Southwest Research. Amazing. So if you don't have internal research, it's great to partner with robust research agencies. We have an amazing one here. But in doing that, yes, they're moving toward additional battery storage of some kind. They're looking at how they utilize wind and transmission improvements, et cetera. But the real core of this, I think, is the human factor, both in terms of the people they serve and the people who work within their walls. And that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the real work is taking place.
Did you have something you wanted to
I
add?
agree. I think, we get wrapped around data analytics. It's kind of a buzz topic right now, and it's an important piece of it, and we have a data analytics group. But there's more to this transformation than data analytics. There's the human factor. It's, the engagement with the customer. We're just starting this journey, and so, we don't need to make a science project out of it. I think there's some pretty basic products and services that our customers are looking for, and we need to deliver those products to our customers. So I liked what Kimberly said. There's a human aspect of this that sits on top of the data analytics.
You did mention a few of the programs and services you have available right now. Do you want to talk more specifically about any of those program services in terms of helping achieve net zero goals?
Well, one that we're very excited about is EVs. So as Paula said, we're trying to figure out how to create a regional EV program. So if you're an Austin Energy customer and you've got a Tesla or a Nissan Leaf, you can come drive to San Antonio and you can charge here, and you don't have to worry about having the right charging account or have a separate account for us. So we want to make that seamless to, again, promote EVs across the corridors and having fast chargers in the right place, across that. I did see your EV documentary, so, I think there's definitely a demand around that. We're also looking to bring out, and Carolyn spoke to it a little bit, a managed EV charging program where we're partnering with our customers so that they don't charge at 5 o'clock when we're hitting peak. And we're going to be providing rebates or incentives around that concept, potentially a time of use concept, a voluntary time of use concept around that idea. So we see EVs as a great way where there is a growing market demand, customer demand today, and a clear decarbonization path there as well.
Carla, you mentioned the Bronzeville project. We're here at City of the Future, and so we've been hearing from a variety of stakeholders on different types of projects like this. Can you speak to what it's been like working across groups of stakeholders on a project like the Bronzeville microgrid projects? What are some of the challenges that you had to overcome, and kind of how did you do that?
I think the key for the Bronzeville microgrid and in the other technology that we're looking at deploying in Bronzeville is really around building those relationships and those partnerships with the community, understanding what the community and our customers are looking for, and that we're not operating in a silo and saying this is the technology you need. And so as we're developing the projects that we're looking at, it's not ComEd saying here's what we're going to do, but it's partnering with people on an advisory committee as well as community members in open forums talking about this is the new technology, what are you looking for, understanding what their needs and wants are. And so that's really what helped develop some of the other projects that we have in Bronzeville. So I talked about the microgrid, but we've also installed an iKiosk, which is basically a smart kiosk in Bronzeville where our customers, the community has free high-speed Wi-Fi, so that we got 1 gigabit Wi-Fi. It provides announcements, community announcements, traffic information on the kiosk to serve the customers. And that's really developed based on these partnerships with the community to understand what they're looking, as well as we've partnered with them to look at some off-grid lighting. So with Chicago Public Schools and Chicago Housing Authority, where we've partnered to install some off-grid lighting at some of the public schools, as well as an EV program where we deployed EVs to 3 different senior housing facilities that they could use those for really sort of last mile transit to get where they need to go. So not only are they benefiting, getting the transportation they need, but ComEd benefits because we get to see the data to understand what is the impact to the EVs, to the grid, when are they charging, and gather that data. And so it's really that partnership looking at, all working together to identify what the right projects are that bring value to everyone.
Kimberly, I see some head nodding, and I know that you work with, many different groups when you work on projects in cities with utilities. How do you kind of overcome some of the common challenges that you typically face while working on those projects?
I think there's a great receptivity to the concepts and ideas. I think where the rubber meets the road in terms of implementation is a challenge. I do like what you said about the stakeholder engagement piece. I think that the utilities I'm seeing, like a CPS Energy, some others I've seen in other parts of the nation, that is a common component in their success of being able to implement and move these things forward. And I would say in each one, for instance, we have SMUD in the Sacramento area. They're looking at. I think each utility and each community has to decide together. What are our priorities and where do we need to put our energies? Because this is hard work. Don't be fooled. This takes money and time, and there's a little blood, sweat, and tears in it. And if you're going to do this kind of hard work, you've got to make sure you are in alignment with your culture of your community and the needs of the people. And in doing that, for instance, they have focused on their statewide EV strategy. So you've got a combination of the state has said, we've set these goals, but then at the same time, they've engaged their community about what the manifestation of that is, and then they're putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And it's a private sector and a public sector effort. Not unlike, what CPS is doing with their flexible path. And I think sometimes people, when it's shared, they may gloss over this very important factor, that a utility like CPS Energy, a municipally owned, vertically integrated utility, has said there are things we don't know about the future, and we're going to make room for it, because we know what is coming is going to be so important to our future energy mix that we're going to plan on that now. And I think it's lost sometimes in the mix of this that a forward-thinking utility like a ComEd or like a CPS or an Austin Energy or these other folks, it takes that willingness to step out there and provide leadership. And we've heard this before today, is that this is a critical component as you adopt this, is that alignment and being willing to say, we're going to embrace the unknown and we're going to work toward it for the benefit of those we serve.
Let me do a quick time check. I can't really see. Okay, we have time for about one question from the audience. If we don't have any questions from the audience, I have another question I could ask. But I do want to ask if the audience has any questions for our panelists.
General question for the panels. I keep hearing a lot about community involvement and solve for it with them, not for them. What are your plans to actually engage the community and communicate to the community to get them involved? I mean, we all know communication includes the education, the awareness, and the program services to actually get them involved. What are your communication plans, or do you see those plans as important?
I'll start. Yes, it's absolutely important. And under Paula's leadership, we have really amped up our customer-facing organization. We have a chief customer officer, Felicia Etheridge, and Rudy Garza. But we are looking for a continuous dialogue with our community at all sorts of different levels. So we have a group called CREW, which is a customer response unit, which is actually out in our community talking to customers about real issues they have, everything from not being able to pay a bill to weatherizing their homes, very real issues that they're dealing with. We've got stakeholder engagement meetings where we talk to different stakeholders, the business community, the environmental community. Angela Rodriguez here leads our climate initiative at CPS Energy. She's talking to folks. So we are trying to have a dialogue and basically take that feedback and really, help it shape our service and our products that we're bringing to our customers.
Yeah, so I'd say probably similar to some of the things Cris had mentioned, right? I mean, we definitely have a team where we're going out, communicating. We go to community events, have tents, right? We engage the local community. Another big piece, and we talked a little bit about as we're developing the technologies, or look at what the right things to develop is these community forums to try and understand their needs. So that we're not just picking something to develop. The other big piece of it that I think is important is to look at what we're doing with the children. And so some of the STEM technology programs that we're looking at, working with local high school students and grade school students, we've recently, or within the last couple of years, built a couple of training centers where we do field trips for the students. We've partnered with the Mercy Girls Home to do STEM education over the summer, and then we have large STEM education programs with the Chicago Public Schools and some of the colleges. And a piece of that is educating them on green technology. And so even if they're not going into STEM fields, they take that with them to understand what is energy and how can they look at connected communities and green technology. And they then share that with their parents, share that with their friends as they're excited about the programs they're working on. And so it's getting some of that into the community through those programs as well. And then maybe a little less community-based, but the other thing that we're looking at is really what is the, we've talked a lot about technology, but what is the reskilling needed for, our engineers or people working at ComEd? And so when you think about reskilling, it's yes, being able to adapt to new technology, but it's also how are we promoting those leadership skills so they can be advocates out in the communities for us. They know how to talk to communities and promote the work that we're doing or talk about the work that we're doing so that people can understand. And so that's a big part of what we're looking at too.
So one of the things, EPICenter, I mentioned, does thought leadership events. And we differentiate ourselves in that our audience is not industry. We bring industry in this conversation, really critical conversation around what's happening in energy to a broader sector, whether that's a small business owner or an enterprise leader. I mean, across the board. And we're talking to them about why you should care about these IoT. Who cares about what is IoT in the first place, and why should I care? But our goal is to bring it down and distill it so that they understand not only why they should care, but how they leverage it for their business, for their family, for their livelihood. And what we're finding, we've done it recently, an informal focus group among some leaders in the community and who are out there working, who are not engaged around energy, and we were asking them about what are they thinking about energy topics. And some of your challenges around these stakeholder things is people are thinking about putting food on the table and about growing their business or teaching their children or engaging with them. So sometimes part of the challenge is that your stakeholders sometimes are having to learn about your business and about why it's important to care about a green future and all of that. And so trying to engage that conversation and broaden it, because I'm a strong believer that, and that's why EPICenter has made this a real tenet of what we do, is that it's those broader conversations that'll make their jobs and ours simpler and easier, because there'll be a better understanding about what needs to take place. Because for me, it continues to come back to this people factor, is that as people change their behaviors, as they engage with smart thermostats or whatever might be available in the marketplace or to them, is that it begins to make more sense, and they understand the importance of it, and they understand, more importantly, the role that they can play, which is truly important.
Well, that wraps it up for us. Thank you for that audience question, and please join me in thanking our panelists for a wonderful discussion. Thank you all.